Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, Spiritual Quest, where today we're up to verse 17 of chapter 12 of the book of John, fourth book of the New Testament. We're looking for resonance from the impersonal life, which we're also in chapter 12 of, and we're looking to see how did Elvis tie these two texts together in his own mind? And we're going to look more at that when we come back from this song, which is Trust in Motion.
Radio static, Memphis bound, WABQ homes a sacred sound. Green, green grass, again and again. The DJ's risk for a loyal friend. Elvis smiles, no words exchanged, just a test of love on a range. Keys in the dark, showroom glow, a Cadillac waits in a silent show. Merry Christmas, GK said, a yellow chariot, tears unshed. What's fame and fortune worth, my friend, if it's not something we can lend? The Chevy Impala, still shining new, passed from Klein to the Circle G crew. Gary Petner wheels instead of race, rode the road with Elvis in his face. Sterling drove it, errands and God, a father's devotion, quiet and hard. He couldn't walk, but he moved the crowd. Fancies whispered, but faintness allowed. No colors filtered, no machine spin, just kept his truth from deep within. A house still burning, a bed like flame, a heart that never saw a grave. Keys in the dark, guess I rolled from Cadillac dreams to a humble home. Elvis gave money, chrome and steel. He gave his friends a way to feel. What's fame and fortune, what can you see, if it's not shedding loyalty?
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. Today we got another great echo coming directly from Elvis Presley. But before we get there, let's enter the spiritual text that we're here to see, and that's the book of John. We're on verse 17 in chapter 12. We're looking for the resonance with the impersonal life and how Elvis may have seen or approached these passages. Verse 17 says, "The people, therefore, that were with him when he called Lazarus out of his grave and raised him from the dead bear record." These are witnesses. The people who were there and saw Lazarus rise from the grave, well, they've told people about it. That's the bearing record. They witnessed it, and they've taken their testimony, their witness testimony forward. And they're telling people here in Jerusalem, because we are back in Jerusalem, Jesus has re-entered, the people have rejoiced, the Pharisees are terrified, because the people are openly calling Jesus a Messiah or the Christ. And they're doing that because the people who saw Lazarus rise out of his grave, they're bearing testimony. And the one who's bearing the most testimony is Lazarus himself, who's walking around. And in verse 18, it says, "For this cause the people also met him, for that they heard that he had done this miracle." So they heard that he'd raised somebody from the dead, and they ran out in order to meet him and see if that was true. We probably would have done the same thing. This is the days before television, before radio. Somebody's coming to your town. They said, "Here comes a man. He's accompanied by a man he raised from the dead. I was there. I saw it." And these people, they've run out to meet him, and that's what's terrifying these Pharisees. And in verse 19, the Pharisees therefore said among themselves, "Perceive ye how ye prevailed nothing? Behold, the world is gone after him." In other words, they're pointing out to each other that we told the people that he was not the Christ and not the Messiah, and they still believe that he is. They're no longer listening to us. This is terrifying because the Romans, who actually control this world, they're allowing the Pharisees and King Herod to practice power. The Romans aren't interested in day-to-day operations. They're only interested in the taxes, the take, the money, the profit. So as long as they get their profit, they don't care. But if the people are not listening to the leaders, well, then they may stop paying the taxes. If that were to happen, well, then the Romans will come fix that issue by taking over completely. They'll probably slaughter a lot of people. There'll be a lot of examples made. Eventually, the Romans do this, but then they go farther, and they completely destroy the Jewish nation. So the fears are not unfounded. They're actually foretelling what's about to happen. In verse 20, "And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast." So these are probably not Jews. These are people from Greece. Greece is, it's a place of cultural impact by this point. It's no longer in control of anything. But if you want it known that your kids have great knowledge, you hire a Greek tutor. So if you're a rich Roman, you probably have your children being taught by a Greek. If you want people to think that you're knowledgeable, you have Greeks on your staff. If you want people to think that you're running an excellent operation, you probably have Greek slaves as your clerks, because that's an outward-facing way of saying, take this business seriously. The Greeks were known to be very knowledgeable, to be part of a culture that had learning that went back a great ways, and everybody in the world was copying what the Greeks had already created. Unfortunately for the Greeks, they'd lost all their political and actual power. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you both here. And these Greeks, in verse 21, they came therefore to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would see Jesus. So I believe Philip is a disciple. Again, I'm not a biblical expert. I think Philip is a Greek name. Again, I'm not an expert on Greek or Roman history. I lean towards the Roman, but and I do know a lot about it. I'm just not an expert in any way. But Philip, that's the name of Alexander's father. And we all know Alexander the Great. And so I feel like Philip is a Greek name, and therefore this man has some kind of Greek ancestry or Greek tie, and that's why they've come directly to Philip. I'm only guessing that from his name, though. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And in verse 22, Philip cometh and telleth Andrew. And again, Andrew and Philip tell Jesus. So one of the disciples tells one of the other disciples, I've got people here that want to see Jesus. And together they determine, well, let's tell Jesus. Now, Elvis is not Jesus, and Jesus is not Elvis, but all lives reflect in Jesus's life. There are patterns that we see in Jesus's life that resonate elsewhere in our lives. And in this particular verse, or even in this whole passage, somebody from outside, these Greeks, they've come to somebody in the inner circle, and they've said, hey, we want to see the main guy. And the inner circle person, they had to confer with another inner circle person. They're gatekeepers. And they've decided, maybe these people should see Jesus, the person that's being guarded. This is the same pattern that happens in Elvis's life. There are gatekeepers. People approach them. Some, after conference among the gatekeepers themselves, are allowed through to Elvis. Others are barred. And Jen says that she thinks that Philip is Greek too, because Prince Philip was a prince of Greece before he married Queen Elizabeth. That's a good point. And Pamela confirms that Philip was one of the original 12 disciples. And in verse 23, and Jesus answered them, saying, the hour is come, and the Son of Man should be glorified. So I think what Jesus is saying to the two disciples is, I'm here to be seen, and for the people to meet me, not really sure why you're keeping them away. Now is the moment. And the Son of Man, that is Jesus. It's always interesting that he calls himself, it's a capital S for Son, but Son of Man, man is not capitalized. Sometimes they use Son of God, and of course God would be capitalized, and that makes sense. We know that Jesus is the Son of God. But here Jesus is emphasizing that he's mortal. He's here on earth with us. He shares our burdens, and that sharing, that communion that can only happen here on earth while he's here, that should be glorified. In verse 24, verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. And so I think he's foreshadowing the crucifixion. He is the piece of corn from the wheat, which would really be a grain of the wheat. I don't think we would think of it as corn. We might think of a kernel of corn falling from the ear of the corn. It'd be the same thing. And that it falls into the ground and dies, meaning the plant itself is no longer alive. The seed that falls from the plant is not truly alive. It is life in potential, but like the fallen bark or the fallen leaf from the tree, it is not alive. It is dead. And it abideth alone. Now, Joseph Benner might look at this and point to it abideth alone and say, that's solitude. And solitude is when you are misaligned. You're walking into your own solitude, which is not the same as walking into yourself. When you walk into yourself, you find your heart, and in your heart is the I am. That's God, that's Jesus inside of you. Your answers that you seek, they are in you. You have access to all of the knowledge that God has. You simply have to access God in your heart. That's inside. But these people are walking into themselves in a different way. They're walking away from the I am, and that pushes them into a solitude because they're excluded from unity. Now, are they truly excluded from unity? Of course not. Nobody can be excluded from unity. All is unity, all is love. But they can't feel it. And so they feel there is an illusion that they are all alone in solitude. They abideth alone. And then it says, but if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. And so this is what a seed does. It waits and then it germinates at the right moment. And it brings forth a new plant, and that new plant will bear more of the corn or the kernels or the seeds. And so it's brought forth much fruit. Now, most of these plants that we're talking about, they probably have food for us too in the form of a fruit or vegetable. So that's probably also being implied that life is sustained for the community around them because of what they bringeth forth. That's kind of what the mission here is for people that Joseph Benner is saying, that we're here on a mission. That mission is to express the divine attribute we were sent to express, and that through that expression we bring knowledge to other divine shards who are then able to absorb that knowledge, that viewpoint, that perspective that we've brought to the table, and they combine it into their own perspective, which they shine forth. We are film strips for the undifferentiated light of love. Our filter of the film strip brings specific clarity and meaning out of the undifferentiated light, like a prism brings colors from white light alone. And that's fruit. That's the much fruit. And in verse 25, it says that he that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. So let's read this slowly one more time. He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. Now, if we were to bring in Joseph Benner, I think he'd look at this first part and he'd say, he that loveth his life shall lose it. This is an aligned person who recognizes that love is the building block of the universe, that their life is love, that love is passing through them. That is what they are expressing. That's part of the divine attribute. Now they're bringing a specific meaning to the love. They're probably, because they are aligned, are able to reach alignment over and over. We can't stay aligned. We have to constantly be bringing ourselves back to alignment. But this is probably a person that can do that. probably most of the relationships in their life reflect this alignment. That is not just a very open conduit of love coming into their own hearts. It's moving forth, it's being projected, it's linking them to all those around them. That their conduit into those other people is strong. And that it's reflected in those relationships around them, that they are literally swimming in love. And they are those that loveth their life. They don't fear their life. They are in communion with the Lord. They understand their purpose. They are realizing their purpose. And someday all of that shall be lost, because nearly all of that is due to the personality, because they were always part of unity and always a shard. But they're fulfilling the mission properly here, and they're going to lose that when they go back to unity. But it's okay. They don't care that they're losing it. It's all part of what's supposed to be done here. It's not clouding them. And the second part is saying, and he that hateth his life in this world, that is a misaligned person. Someone who is walking into solitude. They've probably got a personality that tells them that this or that in the world is worth having, something like money or power or whatever it is that fogs them from the I am. And they are therefore not expressing love as love. They receive love. They may even be receiving a lot of it. It's possible to open your conduit and still be completely fogged and still have the power of the Holy Spirit moving through you, but you twist it through your own selfish desire and layers of your personality. If you are looking the wrong way, you're not looking at God, you're looking away from Him. That's misalignment. And then whatever it is you're projecting, although love is the building block, it's not expressing as love. It's probably misaligning those around you. And you hateth your life. You are broadcasting that because you want people to accompany you so that you can share this hate amongst each other, but that never happens. There are just more and more people that move into solitude, but they're always in their own solitude. But they'll broadcast theirs as well. And then it says that you shall keep it unto life eternal. Joseph Benner would say that at the moment that your mortal shell falls away, there will be a reckoning in yourself. It's not directly from God. It's in yourself where you will recognize all of the misalignment and non-love you have spread, all the times you tried to twist the message, and that has a consequence. It's not a consequence imposed by God. It's imposed by you on yourself. You will feel shame like Adam and Eve when they left the garden. And you will turn and run from God, even though you can't run from God, but you will. And that will drive you further into solitude, and it will take you longer to turn around and come back to unity. And the time that you spend away from unity, out of that mortal shell, that will feel like life eternal. And Gunn's asking verse 25, it's wrong to love life when living it. No, it's not wrong to love life. It's important to recognize that life is love, that we exist in love. Love is not an emotion. It is a state of being. It is the state of the universe. We deny that to ourselves because we don't see it clearly here. And that denial becomes a fog to the alignment of the I am. This is one of the basic messages that will come through the conduit when it becomes open. You can align, but your fog might still block you from the light. But you'll know which way it is because you called out. And Jesus meets you more than halfway. He hears you calling. He knows when you're sincere. And therefore, he reorients you to the right direction. That doesn't mean you can recognize that you are reoriented. You have to have faith that he has reoriented you. And then you have to clear the fog. That's the being still and the meditation. Be still and know that I am God. And then you're able to accept the love as it pours through. You've always been receiving it, but you haven't been accepting it. And Mark says Prince Philip and the disciple Philip are two different people. Prince Philip is Draco Reptilian. Well, I'm not sure which prince you were referring to. I was referring to Prince Philip of Macedonia, who was a Greek. And I believe Jen was referring to Philip, who was in the 20th century and married Queen Elizabeth. And Mark, I don't think I've seen you here before, so welcome to the program. Appreciate seeing you here. And Big Buddy Mike says, I'm guessing that it's wrong to love this earthly life of loving the world spiritually. Well, I don't think it's wrong to love this earthly life. It's just important to recognize that the love that builds this earthly life is the love of unity. And that unity is the true reality. That what we feel to be reality here is actually the illusion. It's just nearly a perfect one, and we can't escape it until we return to unity, but we shouldn't try to escape it because we've got to fulfill a mission here. And in verse 26, hi Anna, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. In verse 26, if any man serve me, let him follow me. That's an interesting line because we saw that Jesus in the comic book version, in a part that I don't think was in John, he healed I think two people who were blind, two beggars who were blind, and they immediately began to follow him. If any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. And if any man serve me, him will my Father honor. So I think he might be talking about the disciples who are following him, but he's also talking about everybody else who wants to follow Jesus. And that if they want to, they can follow him. And that where he is, they shall be. Now, of course, he's everywhere. It's not quite the same when he's saying this in person and you're hearing him in person. But when we're reading this out of the text, we know that according to the text, he is everywhere. And that's where we are. Wherever we are, there he is. But Joseph Benner would say this is true because he's in your heart. And so wherever you go, there he is. And you could look at it as he's going there. He's taking your heart to these different places, and there you are. You're his servant. And if you are, I think Joseph Benner would say, if any man serve me, is if you are aligned, if you are looking at Jesus, if you are calling out and your faith indicates that you are sincere, that your posture is correct, that Jesus recognizes this, and that means God recognizes this because they're the same, and that the Father will honor you. And that means help you maintain alignment. When you call out, when you are disoriented, you will be aligned, even if you can't see it. This is part of the faith. He's told them, you will be aligned, have faith. And in verse 27, now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this cause I came unto this hour. This is a statement of the mission. Specifically, it is Jesus' mission. He's going to die on the cross. But in a more universal sense, I think Joseph Benner would look at this and say, he's talking about each of us. When it comes to the moment when you are supposed to express your divine attribute, make your contribution to the real earth, which Joseph Benner is saying is the true project, which I think of as a giant painting the size of the universe. You know, your whole life you've been sketching away for the part that was yours on the painting. Now has come the moment, although you could say that even the sketching is the moment. This is the hour. Are you going to shy away from it now because your soul is troubled, that doubts creep in, that you have faith, but your doubt is there? Like when Peter stepped out of the boat and he tried to walk to Jesus, his faith was there. And then his soul became troubled and his doubts took over and he sank. But he called out, and Jesus met him more than halfway by ensuring that he remained oriented. And that's what saved him. But Jesus is asking here, shall I call out to my Father and say, this which you sent me for, should I abandon it now, even though we've gotten to the moment, because I suddenly have doubt? And so I think this is a universal experience that he's describing, that we all have this. And he's asking each of us, what do you think? What do you think we should do here? You've been at this kind of crossroads before yourself. Should we just give up? And verse 28 says, Father, glorify thy name. Then came there a voice from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. I think Joseph Benner would say this is confirmation from God through Jesus that the mission should continue. That you are aligned correctly, even to be asking the question. You have aligned correctly just to be able to ask it. That there should be doubt because he's giving you the free will to have the doubt. But that you have remained oriented and brought this doubt to him. And then came there a voice from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. I think that's Jesus saying, when you doubt, ask me, and I will verify that you do not need to doubt, that your doubt is in vain. And then when you doubt again, ask it again. And I'm going to tell you the same thing. But you don't have to hold it inside because I've already told you that it's in vain. I understand it keeps coming up, that it keeps growing inside, that you have to let it back out, that this is part of realignment, that when you are misaligned, the doubt is strong, and the only way to realign is to let it go each time. So you just keep on coming back and saying it over and over. And as long as you're saying it to me, we'll handle it together. And Elizabeth is saying, should we feel guilty or upset when we have doubt or frustration? I think this passage is telling us no. that this is part of why you're here. You should doubt. Doubt is good, but don't let it block you from the I am. Don't turn away because you doubt. Bring that doubt to me, to the I am, and the I am will dispel the doubt. Now, if we looked at Mother Teresa, I think her writings, her private writings, would indicate the doubt is never dispelled. But I don't think that can be true either. I don't think she could have come and written the doubt over and over again if it hadn't been dispelled over and over again. That this was a physical representation of realignment. Some people use a talisman, like a coin that they hold in their hand, or a polished stone, something that helps them reach meditation. I think Mother Teresa may have cried out her doubts in words, in written word. It's a form of prayer or meditation. And it's easy to look at and say, oh, this person doubted, therefore there is no God. That even this person who says they have faith were lying. Well, I don't think any of that's true. I think right here we see that you are going to doubt. You're supposed to doubt. I want you to doubt. And I want you to bring it back to me. And I want you to even scream at me if you need to, that it's not fair that I continue to force you into a position where you have these doubts. But that you're completing the mission properly. And the fact that you can have the doubt and yet remain oriented is proof that you're on the correct spiral. And Gun's asking, one can't feel guilty if not understanding it all? Oh, you can feel guilty, but you don't need to feel guilty. Again, guilt is something that is neither bad nor good. It is neutral. It depends on whether you are aligned in the feeling of your guilt or misaligned in the feeling of your guilt. Your feeling is going to amplify whichever direction you're facing in. So our emotions, they amplify our misalignment, but they can also amplify our alignment. And so if you feel that guilt and you are aligned, you can give it to God. And if you feel unable to give it to him, even if you're sure that you are aligned, then hold on to it. As long as you're aligned, it's serving you properly. And there are times when we should feel guilt, but we don't need to feel guilt about anything that, about being aligned or misaligned. We need to recognize when our signs that we're misaligned, and guilt may be one of them. But we don't need to allow it to rule our thoughts. We need to recognize it as the signpost that it is. It's like a danger sign on the road. There's danger coming up. We don't need to dwell on the danger. We just need to be aware that there is danger. And in this case, it's a sign that says you might want to turn around. And Gun's clarifying that she means, should we feel guilt? You should if it keeps you aligned. If it does not keep you aligned, if it moves you into misalignment, if you feel shame. Now, shame may also keep you aligned, but in most cases, it's going to turn you away. Because if you just think about shame and try to see an image of it, it's almost always somebody that's turned their back on someone else, probably put their face in their hands, and they're probably walking away, if not running. That is a picture of shame. Now, if that shame causes you to turn around and run to God, then keep the shame. But if the shame forces you to turn away from God, then cast it aside. There's other lessons in the Bible about that, about If a piece of your body offendeth you, then cast it aside. That's the offense. It turns you away from God. Or from the I am in your heart. Let's read verse 29, and we're going to actually leave it with this one. It says, "The people therefore that stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Others said, an angel spake to him." So when the Father spoke back, when God spoke back, or when Jesus made the statement that the Father had spoken back, those that were nearby, they heard sound effects that went with it, like thunder. Others might have heard his voice amplified because they're saying an angel spake to him. But something happened in that moment, and I think this is, again, the discernment of the people. They recognize that he speaks truth and that he is the Christ and the Messiah. But let's spiral out of the text for now. Probably learned some important lessons there. And let's spiral over to some other pieces that I have for us to look at today. This one is difficult to see. But it says JD at the top, and I think it says to JD. But I can't really make out that letter that's before it. This is written by Elvis. It says JD, much love to a friend, sincerely, Elvis Presley. Elvis signed this in the front of a copy of The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner, and he gave it to J.D. Sumner. Now, if you know what that thing that looks like a 2 is, maybe that's an early... Well, that just struck me. There was no text messaging when Elvis was around, but I think he wrote 2 with the number 2 to J.D., which is the way that the kids today would do the texting, right? Or maybe when I say kids today, I meant people from 30 years ago. But to me, they're, I'm sure you guys understand what I'm saying. But here it says, to JD, much love to a friend, sincerely Elvis Presley. Elvis gave JD a copy of The Impersonal Life. Now, what we don't have is any of the annotations or underlines that Elvis made in this particular copy. But what I do have is a letter that J.D. Sumner's daughter wrote, who is Sherry Enoch. And so I believe she married one of the stamps, because there's like an Ed Enoch, and I think there was another one maybe. Not an expert at the stamps at this moment. Probably will become one at some point, but Sherry is JD's daughter. And she wrote about this copy of The Impersonal Life. And she said, it is said that this little black book was one that Elvis loved only second to the Bible. Elvis Presley was a Christian and a spiritual man, as he often expressed in his sentiments and certainly songs. I remember my dad speaking of often spending time with Elvis. After concerts, reading and discussing the Bible and various other books that spoke to Elvis on a spiritual level. The Impersonal Life clearly enlightened and inspired Elvis. He presented copies to colleagues of his inner circle and friends, believing that anyone who read the book would see life more clearly. On one such night, Elvis gave a copy of this profound book to my father. Inscribed is a simple statement that I know was true. To J.D., much love to a friend, Elvis Presley. Elvis's love for gospel music was his real link with his earliest years, which provided constant support throughout his demanding career. Elvis's passion for Southern-style gospel music formed the foundation for his long personal relationship with J.D. Sumner. As a teenager, Elvis considered J.D. Sumner his hero. At the end, J.D. knew Elvis was also a hero. Sherry Enoch, May 20th, 2014. I thought that was a very nice letter about the friendship between Elvis Presley and J.D. Sumner. And Jen says, looks like a 2, like a number 2, and that's how I would interpret it. Number 2 for 2, the word 2. He was always far ahead. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that's what it is now that I'm looking at it. And that would never have struck me in the 1990s. I would never have figured that out. And Pamela says, a lovely letter. And Elizabeth says, that was very well said by Sherry. And here are my all equations at a glance that try to sum up Joseph Benner into bite-sized pieces we can remember and where we can find the resonance with the other passages that we read. And I think on this one, we'll look at the third down from the second column. It says misaligned equals the inability to feel or accept love, and that equals solitude. And we compare that to the second down, which is aligned equals ability to feel and accept love, which equals unity. And that, I believe, is what Jesus was speaking about, or at least that's what Joseph Benner believes Jesus was speaking about, that those who are walking into solitude now here on earth, they're going to find it the hardest to return to unity. But those who already live in a near unity state, who see that below or behind all that we know is love, well, their return to unity is going to be very simple. And Gunn's saying Sherry still has the book. Well, no, that letter was written to accompany the book as it was auctioned. I don't even know if that was the first auction of the book. They may have approached Sherry at the time that they were going to auction the book in 2014, but it may have left her possession or JD's before. I don't know. That is kind of the way the auction circuit works, though, is as pieces resurface, they'll have provenance with them, but a smart auctioneer will find other people to add provenance and, capture letters like Sherry's to add to the piece, because that's going to simply add value, even if that provenance came much later. Now, as we talk about spirals, because we've spiraled out of the book and into what Sherry had to say, and we talk about spirals all the time. I talk about them all the time. This is another painting about spirals. This one happens to be called, I think it's called Salvador Dali's Catfish, but it's not by Salvador Dali. It's by another artist. And so it's supposed to look, I guess, like the eye of a catfish or the scales of a cat, or it's somehow supposed to represent a catfish. I mean, I clearly see a spiral. I do see things that make me think of underwater scenes. There's a massive amount of color in this picture. There is something that looks like a fish's tail. Okay, this is Salvador Dali Catfish by Vincent Scarpace. And so, do you see Salvador Dali in this painting? Do you see a catfish? Is the artist using the word catfish in the colloquial sense that we use it today, which is on social media sites, which means that somebody is pretending to be something they're not? So perhaps the artist is pretending to be Salvador Dali. This is not exactly the way Salvador Dali would paint something, but it does bring Dali to mind. Specifically the colors. I don't ever remember seeing any Dali paintings that had these colors in them. But you can clearly see a spiral. Very clearly. And that brings us to the divine now, which equals the spiral of sequential time collapsed into a single point. So we can see that definition on screen. That's the way I describe the way God experiences time, because time is something we use to describe the way we experience the universe in a sequential fashion. But the spiral of sequential time, when it collapses into what it truly is, which is the love behind it, it's the divine now. And if we go back to the painting, you can see that the spiral collapses. It spirals into a single point. You could think of the entire journey and mission that we're on here on Earth as having started at that single point and spiraling outwards, and we're at the furthest outreach of the spiral. This is where we need to be to express the attribute. You can see that as you get into the spiral, it's too small. Everything's pushed together too much to make any specific distinctions. In this particular painting, it's pure white. So we've got to be way out here so we can show that specific meaning clearly, that it can stand out on its own and be seen by others to be absorbed. But eventually, we're all going to spiral back into that single point, the unity that truly is the reality. The idea of a catfish, Salvador Dali, is also a kind of what we're doing here. We're a catfish unity. We're out here with our portion of unity, pretending to be the whole thing in a way. That's part of the mission. And if we were to add all of ourselves together, each and every person throughout all of time, then we would be something that very closely approximates all of unity. But right now, we're each a catfish of who we once were. That's what our personality is. It's something that we're not, and yet we are. And Big Buddy Mike is saying it kind of looks like a catfish in a bubble. It does a little bit. There's definitely a point where you can kind of see an eye on the fish, and you can see a tail. There's a bit of a fin at the top, and there's some fins at the bottom. It's all suggested in here. So it's kind of a surrealist painting at the same time. Oh, maybe that's what they call this anyway. I'm not enough of an art expert to even know. But I've got this small presentation I'm going to quickly walk through. We might go through this in more length at some time. But the divine light is God equals love equals light. So it's kind of like the divine now, but it's the white point. Instead of being time, we're really thinking of it now as love and light. And the source is the undifferentiated divine light. Just like we saw in the painting, it was pure white. a brilliant, radiant white containing infinite rays, particles, and colors within it. It represents all knowledge and possibility, a divine amount, more than any single vessel can hold. That's us. We're the single vessels. We can't hold it all. We can let it all pass through us, but we can't hold it all. God equals love equals light. This is the ultimate synthesis. Undifferentiated divine light is the physical manifestation of infinite love. And humanity is the filter. The light filters through us, giving it a projection of meaning. The light is undifferentiated and it contains all knowledge, and humanity is the prism. As light projects through our filter, it brings clarity and specific meaning, transforming the infinite into something that can be witnessed, shared, and absorbed. And Mark's asking, is that a signature on the lower left-hand corner? The lower left-hand corner. Of the painting, it's in the lower right-hand corner. And it's Vincent Scarpace, if that's what you're asking about. And the film strip, we are filters of love and light. Imagine yourself as a film strip. Each cell of the strip is a unique filter for the undifferentiated divine light. And here we can see representations of a film strip, and one has a heart and one has a hand holding a heart. And each of these would be slightly different meanings that are running on your film strip. But it gives you an idea of how light could be projected through the strip and come out with a single piece of knowledge or idea instead of everything at once. And just as a projector turns clear light into an image, your specific filter gives the light communicable meaning. So it's something that can be passed back and forth between people. And the divine light passes through our story to be love. Just as individual words combine to form a sentence, the sequential frames of our lives combine to express a coherent meaning of the divine. That's why we need to be somewhere where we are able to experience sequence. All of humanity, a cosmic collection of light, across all time and space, the films of humanity converge. Countless lives, countless filters, all focusing their unique projection back towards the one divine source. So this is like we overlay all of the films together, because that's kind of the way that God would see them. He doesn't experience time or space like we do. It all happens in the exact same instant. He'd be watching all of our films at once, all on the same screen. It's the ultimate convergence, unity without loss of depth. The divine project. This is what Joseph Benner is describing with the real Earth. When all the films of humanity are focused on a single screen, they do not blur into chaos. Instead, they approximate the culmination of the divine project, the ultimate expression of all attributes. This is the purpose of God's project. He's bringing everything into the culmination. All attributes collapsed into a single perfect point of expression, like we saw in the painting of the spiral. The perfect center white light. In this case, it's the Word. That's how Joseph Benner describes it. The Word. That's how Scripture is described. The Word. That's why this has so much resonance. In this final reflection, may we refine our filter to transmit more love and light. And with that, I'm going to leave this episode because we've again run up against our hour. And I'm going to leave with a song. And this song is Quiet Light. Thank you all so much for spending your time here with me today. I appreciate every moment that you're here. And you all keep on taking care of business.
Beauty walks soft as a whisper, yet thunders like storms overhead. Kind and gentle in its passing, still a thing of might and dread. And the word became a lantern, placed in trembling human hands, saying, "Child, behold my glory, not in faces, but in hearts that understand." For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every wanderer is called home. He wrote truth in quiet margins for the ones who read between. Faith will conquer, said the giver. I am the light you've always seen. Beauty's not the mask we're wearing, not the mirrors feeding grace. Beauty burns within the heart space, kindness casting God's own shadow on the contours of a face. And the I am speaks in stillness, in the breath between each thought. The soul remembers union with the love it never lost. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every wanderer is called home. He wrote truth in quiet margins for the ones who read between. Faith will conquer, said the giver. I am the light you've always seen. Distance only closes in the moment, when the veil of flesh is torn. Yet the word says I am with you from the instant you are born. Dreams stay cold, room silent, body, mind and spirit still as one. In that hush the lantern brightens, and the night becomes undone. Be as gentle as the lamb is when you're dealing out your love. Be as fearless as the lion when you guard what's holy from above. Let your honor strike like lightning, swift and righteous in its speed. For the light that lives within you is the strength behind the creed. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every seeker finds the one. He wrote truth in quiet margins as a gift for those in need. Faith will conquer, said the giver. Walk in light and you are free. And the I am whispers softly as the lantern warms your hand.